"Cards under your plate," she whispered. Her smile was sweet, the kind reserved for family photographs and stage dinners. But when I lifted the lid off the polished wood box, what greeted me wasn't a retirement gift. It was a neatly folded white napkin, the kind they place in your lap at weddings or under a teacup. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Ronald. I'm 71 years old, and this is what really happened. The banquet room at Hunter's Ridge Country Club smelled of polished oak and lemon oil. The air was cool, conditioned just enough that the heavy velvet curtains barely stirred. Golden sconces lined the paneled walls, their flickering light stretching into long, distorted shadows that crawled across the satin-draped tables. A chandelier glowed above me, dripping with crystals that scattered tiny sparks of light across polished glassware. Behind me hung the company emblem, a brass tree, its branches etched with words I had spent my career living under: Cedar and Vaughan Consulting Group. To outsiders, it was just a logo, but to me it was a 43-year ledger of late nights, failed deals resurrected at the last hour, and meetings where one wrong sentence could sink a project. It was my retirement lunch, 4 decades compressed into a single afternoon. They had laid out a full buffet: steamed vegetables, carved prime rib, lemon tarts balanced like jewels on silver trays. Champagne flutes gleamed in rows waiting for toasts. On one side of the room, a television monitor played a slideshow of my life at the company. Grainy photos from the 80s, team shots at holiday parties, a picture of me shaking hands with clients whose names most of the young interns wouldn't even recognize. But most of the faces in the room weren't family. They were co-workers, a few friends I still trusted, some young hires who had only ever known me as the old man in the corner office who double-checked every contract twice. I nodded at them politely, acknowledging their nervous smiles. And then there was Emily, my daughter-in-law. She sat near the center, dressed to be noticed. Pearl earrings caught the chandelier's glow every time she tilted her head, throwing white sparks against the dark blue of her dress. She leaned close to someone from HR, laughter spilling from her like champagne bubbles, too loud, too sharp, every syllable carefully measured to cut through the gentle murmur of conversation. Derek, my son, wasn't there yet. He was never on time for things like this. But Emily? Emily never arrived late. If there was a stage, she wanted to be at the center of it. I watched her fingers flicker beneath the linen-draped table. Her phone screen flashed once against her palm. She checked it quickly, then lifted her eyes toward me, as though making sure her audience hadn't missed a cue. Then she rose. Glass in hand, she tapped its rim with the back of a dessert fork. The sound rang out, clink, 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 thin but commanding. Conversation stuttered into silence. Chairs shifted. All eyes turned toward her. "Let's raise a toast," Emily said. Her smile was radiant. Too radiant. "To Ronald, the most persistent man I've ever met." A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Not cruel, not yet. Just polite. The kind of sound people make when they aren't sure if the joke is finished. I smiled too. Carefully. The way you smile when you know the spotlight has been turned on you, whether you wanted it or not. "Persistent," she continued, voice warm with practiced affection. "Because who else would stay at the same company for over 40 years, especially in this economy?" This time the laughter was sharper, more confident. I noticed the older colleagues glance away, their eyes sliding toward their glasses. A few interns exchanged puzzled looks, unsure if they were allowed to laugh. "And persistent," Emily added, raising her brows, "because even after we begged him to relax and enjoy retirement, he still checked his email during Christmas dinner." Louder laughter now, too loud, a joke told for effect, not for humor. She paused, turned her head just enough so that her gaze locked with mine across the table. "I guess we all need a Ronald in our lives," she said sweetly. "Someone who keeps going, no matter how obsolete he gets." The room shifted. The laughter died too quickly. Forks rested half raised. No one wanted to be caught with their smile still showing. I kept my spine straight, fingers wrapped calmly around the stem of my champagne flute. If my knuckles whitened, only I could feel it. Emily's eyes glittered. She gave the smallest nod toward a waiter standing in the corner. He stepped forward, carrying a box. Walnut wood polished to a shine, brass hinges glinting, a white ribbon tied neatly around the middle. He set it down in front of me. Every head turned. I untied the ribbon slowly, lifted the lid. Tissue paper rustled softly under my fingertips. And then a napkin, folded, crisp, white, the kind you tuck onto your lap before a meal. There was a faint murmur from someone near the end of the table. A cough, strained and awkward. Somewhere else, a stifled laugh broke like a match snapping in the dark. My eyes fixed on the fabric. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. Emily leaned in slightly, lips curving. Her voice dropped low, meant only for me. "Thought you could use it?" she whispered. "For the tears later." And then, "God help me," she winked. The laughter around me blurred into silence. I no longer heard the clink of forks or the shuffle of chairs. Only the dull throb of blood in my ears. Only the faint, irritated buzz of fluorescent bulbs overhead. I drew a breath, slow, measured. My hand moved back to the box. Beneath the napkin, hidden like a secret, was something else. An envelope, thick ivory paper, heavy stock. I didn't let my eyes linger on it, didn't give her the satisfaction. My fingers slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. The lid of the box closed softly, final as a coffin lid. Emily's smile faltered, just for a heartbeat. I raised my glass, my voice steady. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." Polite, controlled, devoid of flourish, just the way they expected an old man to sound. Hours later, when the last handshake had been exchanged and the last farewell photograph snapped, I found myself in the empty parking lot. The country club stood quiet behind me, windows glowing faintly against the night. A cold wind tugged at my jacket. I slid into my Buick, the seat creaking familiarly beneath my weight. The overhead security lamp buzzed weakly above, flickering like it might burn out at any moment. Only then did I reach into my pocket and pull out the envelope. My hands hesitated, but curiosity broke through. I unfolded the flap, slid the papers free. Not a card, not a farewell letter, but legal documents, a notarized transfer, and 2 type sheets. The first, dated 6 years earlier, outlined a trust account, my trust account. Assets, holdings, everything I had worked decades to protect. The second, I felt my breath catch in my throat. A power of attorney revocation, official, stamped, signed. Dated only 2 weeks ago. And the signature, Derek's, filed through the county clerk's office in Lubbock, Texas, where my son and Emily had just moved. My pulse slowed to a crawl. He had cut me out, removed me from the trust, stripped me from decision-making, locked me out of the system I had built for my family's future. The betrayal was clinical, precise. It might have worked, but they made one mistake. The napkin, Emily's little joke. It hadn't been just cruel. It had been careless, revealing. She didn't know I had the documents. She thought they'd stay hidden until the lawyer's delivery next week. But now, I held the originals. The knife they meant to bury in my back was in my hand instead. That night, I didn't rage. Didn't call Derek. Didn't storm into their house demanding answers. I sat with the Buick engine idling, the soft hum filling the silence. I folded the documents carefully back into their envelope. 43 years at Cedar and Vaughn had taught me one truth. You don't strike when you're bleeding. You strike when they think they've won. 2 days later, I drove to the county records office in Amarillo. The building was dull concrete, its lobby smelling faintly of stale coffee and floor wax. I walked to the clerk's counter, laid the documents down, requested copies notarized, filed a legal hold on the attempted transfer, submitted an inquiry into misrepresentation of power of attorney. It took less than an hour, no shouting, no theatrics, Just one signature, one red stamp slammed onto the paper. The clerk glanced at the file, his lips twitching in amusement. "You're the second Ronald Vaughn this week," he said lightly, flipping through a folder. I looked at him, didn't smile, didn't correct him, because I wasn't the second. I was the real one, and I was done playing the old fool. The mailman almost didn't recognize me. That caught me off guard. I'd lived in the same one-story brick house for over 30 years, tucked off Cedar Ridge Drive, 2 turns past the high school stadium, where Friday night lights still lit up the town like it was the Super Bowl every fall. Same quiet street, same trimmed hedges, same faded mailbox that still bore my late wife's careful handwriting on the side. Vaughn. Neighbors here prided themselves on routine. Flags waved in every yard. Porch lights clicked on automatically at dusk, timed to perfection like clock hands. But retirement had changed my schedule. I was home earlier than I ever used to be. That alone was enough to puzzle the man who had dropped envelopes through my slot for decades. "Mr. Vaughn," he said, tipping his cap, squinting against the afternoon glare. "Big stack today." His voice carried the casual warmth of someone who knew the rhythm of my life better than most of my family ever had. I nodded, took the bundle from his hand, and stepped inside before the blast of air-conditioned cool could slip out the door. The weather report on the morning radio had promised triple-digit heat by evening. West Texas never disappointed. The house greeted me with silence, a silence that had its own texture. Not empty, not exactly, but heavy. It smelled faintly of lemon floor cleaner from the scrubbing I'd done the day before, mixed with the ghost of old cigar smoke. That smell lingered even though I'd quit years ago, back when Derek got married, and Emily told me in her careful way that smoking around children was antiquated. She had meant me by that word, though she never admitted it. The smell clung anyway, to the leather of my armchair, to the suede curtains my wife had picked out before she passed, even to Derek's old baby blanket, long folded in the cedar chest upstairs. Derek used to wrinkle his nose at it as a boy. Funny thing, now I would have given anything to wrap myself in that scent instead of the silence that pressed down around me. The television blinked in the corner. I hadn't bothered changing the channel from the weather loop. A dry spell coming, the weatherman warned, his voice hollow through the speakers. Not that it mattered. The yard would keep growing. The grass didn't care if I watched the forecast or not. I set the stack of mail on the dining table. The same oak slab where we'd once shared family dinners, birthday cakes, Christmas turkeys. Now it was just a staging ground for bills, circulars, and the occasional letter that still had handwriting on the envelope. My fingers froze on one in particular, a yellow envelope, return, address stamp from Lubbock. My chest tightened even before I slid it open. Inside was a card, not handwritten, not touched by human feeling, just a piece of cardstock with machine-printed text, the kind you could order in bulk online, looped cursive meant to imitate warmth. "Dear Dad, thanks again for the beautiful lunch. We hope you enjoy retirement." Emily picked out the napkin herself. "With love, Derek and Emily." I read it once, twice. My jaw locked tight enough that my teeth ached. Picked out the napkin herself. Not a mistake. Not an accident. Deliberate. Documented. A humiliation turned into a punchline, mailed to my own home. The weight of the card in my hand felt heavier than it should have, as if those smug words were made of lead. I slid the card back inside the envelope, pressed it under the rest of the mail like bearing something indecent. My hands shook once. Just once. Then I reached for the phone. It rang twice before a clipped professional voice answered. Joseph Stein's office. I hadn't spoken to Joseph in 5 years. "This is Ronald Vaughn," I said, my voice steady even though my pulse pounded. "I need to speak with him. Tell him it's regarding trust number 1149TX. The silence on the other end stretched, longer than protocol allowed. Then, "One moment." Joseph's voice came through familiar and sharp, like broken glass you could cut yourself on if you weren't careful. He had been my financial attorney back when I first set up Derek's college fund, a man who understood numbers better than people, but always managed to keep both in line when it mattered. "I thought you were done with all this," he said flatly. "I was," I replied, "until I wasn't." I told him everything: the napkin, the box, the envelope hidden beneath, the transfer documents that should never have reached my hands. He listened without interruption, only the occasional intake of breath, letting me know he was still on the line. "And you're sure," he finally said, "they didn't mean for you to see those documents?" "Dead sure," I said. "They thought HR would hand me a gag gift, napkin and all." A low exhale, sharp at the end. "Then we have an opportunity." I let the silence hold, heavy between us. "I don't want a war," I said slowly. "I want insurance." Joseph chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Same thing, just dressed nicer." That weekend I drove to Lubbock, not to see Derek, not yet. I wanted to see the house, their house, a beige stucco two-story in a gated community called Spanish Oaks. I pulled up slowly, rolling past manicured hedges and wide driveways. Every door bore an oversized wreath, even though it was September and the leaves hadn't begun to turn. Signs of money, or at least the illusion of it. I sat there, engine idling, staring at the house my money had helped build, a down payment given with love, turned into bricks that now walled me out. An old man across the street watered his lawn, the hose arcing a thin silver spray over grass, so green it looked artificial. He nodded politely when our eyes met. I nodded back, the gesture hollow. That night, I checked into a Best Western off the loop. The bedspread was scratchy. The AC unit rattled like a tired engine, but it was a place to think. I spread the documents across the desk and read them again under the harsh light of the lamp. Buried in the third paragraph of the POA revocation was the line that made my stomach turn. "All digital assets and investment instruments are hereby transferred to the financial stewardship of Emily Vaughn." Sloppy, overreaching, greedy. Joseph had been right. Opportunity. Because 6 months earlier, I had quietly opened a secondary trust, a separate LLC, meant for my grandchildren's education, medical expenses, true emergencies, one they hadn't known existed, and their wording had just attempted to seize it. That was their mistake, and I intended to make sure they paid, not with yelling, not with fists pounding on their door, but with truth. 2 days later, I walked into the Amarillo County Recorder's office. The building smelled like dust, old ink, and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, too bright, making the floor tiles look more yellow than white. "Back again, Mr. Vaughn?" the clerk asked, smiling as if I were a regular at a diner. I slid across the counter a notarized affidavit Joseph had prepared. It linked the sloppy language in the revocation to a pending inquiry into fraudulent transfer of fiduciary power. She scanned it carefully, stamped it with a loud thunk, and just like that, their access froze. Bank inquiries bounced, accounts flagged, automated emails triggered audit reviews, but I didn't tell them, not yet. I wanted Emily to refresh her Wells Fargo app until her manicured nails chipped against the glass. I wanted Derek's voice to rise an octave when he called the bank and got put on hold. I wanted them to feel it. While they did, I went to work. At my dining table, the same place where Derek once scribbled math problems. While I checked bills by lamplight, I began to write. A list, column by column. Every dollar I had given them. Every favor I had granted. Every sacrifice I had made in the name of love. $89,000 for Derek's grad school, $35,000 for the wedding, $15,000 for Emily's Doom cupcake business, $10,000 for the new roof. The list grew, numbers climbing like rungs on a ladder no one ever thanked me for building. Beside it, a second column. Every insult, every dismissal, every wound delivered with a smile. The napkin, the Christmas dinner jibe, the birthday party I wasn't welcome to plan. Pain I had swallowed whole, finally put into ink. And once I saw it there, black and white against yellow paper, the fire came back. 3 weeks passed before the voicemail arrived. "Dad, hey!" Derek's voice crackled through the speaker. "Weird stuff with the accounts. I think there's a mix-up with one of the trusts. Emily's stressed. Can you call me back?" I played it twice, not because I needed clarification, but because I savored the panic. I didn't call him back. Instead, I RSVP'd for a fundraiser gala Emily's mother was hosting at the Lubbock Country Art Center. I had declined every other year, citing travel or fatigue. This time, I said yes, and then I dialed Joseph. "Do we still have the original trust deed with the alternate trustee clause?" "Yes," he said cautiously. "You want to invoke it?" "No," I said, a smile curling despite myself. "I want to present it." "Where?" "At a dinner," I replied. "One where the napkins won't be folded so smugly." The night of the gala, I wore my charcoal suit. Silver cufflinks glinted under the lobby lights. The same pair Emily once complimented at a family dinner years ago. Valet attendants whisked cars away with polished efficiency. Soft jazz drifted through the lobby. A silent auction showcased overpriced paintings no one actually wanted, but everyone wanted to be seen bidding on. I entered just as the second course was served. Their tables sat near the front, beneath chandeliers dripping gold. Emily's face blanched the instant she saw me. Derek stood quickly, forcing a smile. "Dad, you made it." I nodded once. "Of course. Couldn't miss another dinner with family." The other guests at their table shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. I waited until dessert. Then, while Emily spoke mid-sentence, I reached into my pocket, pulled out a folded napkin. Her eyes locked on it like a deer spotting headlights. I laid it gently beside her champagne glass, then slid an envelope across the white linen tablecloth. "This," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the chatter, "is the part you didn't notice." She didn't move, didn't touch it, but I knew she understood. Inside were certified copies of the original trust, the revoked POA, and the audit summary. She had played a public prank. Now I was about to deliver a public education. The sound that broke first wasn't from her mouth. It was the champagne flute. Her hand twitched just enough to tap the crystal stem against the edge of the plate. A high-pitched clink echoed across the gala table, sharp as a dropped pin. For a moment, every other sound in the hall, forks, low laughter, muted jazz, dimmed into the background like someone had turned a dial. Emily didn't blink. Her smile remained frozen, cheeks stiff under too much blush, the way a stage mask stays fixed even when the actor behind it is sweating. She'd built that smile like armor, rehearsed for cameras that weren't there, for donors who'd never know her private side. Derek leaned forward, whispering something sharp and low. His lips barely moved, his jaw tightened as though chewing on words. I couldn't hear them over the swell of Glenn Miller in the speakers, but I didn't need to. I could read his body, the way his hand hovered protectively over the envelope, then retreated, unsure if touching it would burn. "What is this?" Emily asked finally. Her voice had lost its cheer. Not loud enough for the guests at the next table to catch, but brittle, glass thin. I leaned in, cufflinks catching the dim chandelier light, like small cold stars. The same cufflinks she'd once praised at a Christmas dinner, when pretending to like me was still convenient. "It's what you missed," I said softly, "and what you tried to steal." Her fingers twitched, reaching for the envelope, then paused. "Go ahead," I said. "It's yours now, all of it." I watched her thumb the seal open. The gala music swelled behind us. An old Glenn Miller tune, barely recognizable under the murmur of clinking forks and donor chatter, brass instruments cutting through the air like questions nobody wanted to ask. As she unfolded the papers, I stood, not abruptly, slowly, deliberately, every movement deliberate, letting the tension stretch like a held note. I picked up the napkin she had once given me, the white square of mockery, and placed it on my plate, pressing it down with the back of a silver spoon, as though pinning an insect. Across the room, the event photographer snapped a picture, his flash blinking once. The timing was perfect. Legacy loves irony. Back in Amarillo, the silence of my house felt different now. Not lonely, settled. I sat under the yellow lamp in my study, the one that always hummed after 9 p.m., and reviewed the letter Joseph had couriered that morning. The paper was thick, creamy, faintly smelling of ink and envelope glue. R.E. Appointment of Successor Trustee. Ronald Vaughn, Trust. TX. Effective immediately, all digital asset management, capital investment decisions, and fiduciary control revert solely to the grantor, Ronald Vaughn, under revocation protocol per paragraph 8, subsection C. There it was, black ink on linen paper, signed, sealed, legal. I traced the embossed seal with my thumb, felt the indent of the notary's stamp. It was more than a document. It was a map back to my own authority. I smiled and reached for the second envelope, the one I hadn't shown Emily yet. Inside was something far more damaging than a legal document. An audit log, itemized, with timestamps, each entry like a pinprick, marking the dates and hours she'd used Derek's access credentials to attempt transfers. Every attempt highlighted in red, every failure time-stamped to the second, showing how she'd tried to siphon funds from the original trust into a shell account under the name Moss Haven Culinary LLC. Her bakery, the one I funded, the one she said failed because of a bad lease. The truth was there in bold numbers. She had tried to reroute 47 Tubman 800 in February alone, and failed, because I had built the trust with two-stage withdrawal keys. She didn't know the second key was tied to my signature, stored at the county clerk's vault in Amarillo, and that made her every attempt not just cruel, but criminal. I could have pressed charges, but revenge doesn't always need a gavel. Sometimes it just needs light, and the right crowd to see it. 1 week later, I called Derek. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad, about the gala. Look." Emily said it came out of nowhere. She didn't mean... She did, I interrupted calmly, and I need you both to meet me. Sunday, Church Hall, 3 p.m. A pause. "Church Hall?" he repeated. "What for?" I let the silence stretch until the static hissed. Then, "Bring your kids." Sunday arrived soft and gray, the sky low like a ceiling. Rain tapped lightly on the windows of the church social hall in downtown Amarillo, each drop a small drumbeat. The same hall where we'd hosted Derek's graduation lunch. The same kitchen where I'd once handed Emily her favorite lemon squares during her pregnancy with little Toby. Folding chairs formed a semicircle on the waxed floor. A whiteboard stood blank against the wall. Coffee urns hissed quietly, filling paper cups with weak brew. And people, 12 of them to be exact. Former co-workers, 2 close friends, the old family pastor with his worn Bible, Joseph, too, standing off to the side with a leather briefcase, his glasses reflecting the dim fluorescent light. Emily walked in first, her heels clicking sharply against the linoleum. Derek followed, holding Toby's hand. The boys' eyes darted curiously from face to face. They stopped short when they saw the others. "What is this?" Emily asked, her voice high and sharp, the echo bouncing off the hall's low ceiling. "A meeting," I said evenly. "A truth meeting," she scoffed. "You ambushed us?" "No," I said. "I invited you." I motioned to Joseph. He stepped forward, opened the briefcase with a quiet snap, and pulled out a thick folder. Set it gently on the table as if it might explode. One by one, he handed out copies. To each person in the room, audit summaries, POA revocation dates, trust clause references, email, logs. Paper whispered as it changed hands. Emily froze mid-breath, her face drained of color, lipstick suddenly too bright against pale skin. Derek flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing deeper with each sheet. "You kept this?" he asked, his voice small. "No," I said. "I found it. when you tried to hide it. Emily turned to him, eyes narrowing. You told me. This was handled. It was supposed to be, he snapped, the first crack in his composure. They said the documents would bypass him. Joseph cleared his throat softly, like a judge preparing to read a verdict. We've already initiated legal counterfilings. No assets were moved. But the attempt is documented. If Ronald chooses to proceed further. I don't, I said, cutting him off. Heads turned. I don't want lawsuits. I want legacy. Clarity. Emily's jaw tightened, her nostrils flaring. So you humiliate us? In front of them? No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. She spun on her heel, the sound sharp as a gavel strike. But I wasn't finished. There's more. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the original napkin, held it up between two fingers, letting it dangle like a flag of surrender that wasn't mine. Remember this? Silence fell heavier than the rain outside. This wasn't just a joke, it was a message that you thought you could reduce my life to something disposable, something to dab your mouth with and toss aside. The air in the hall shifted. People leaned forward slightly, as though the temperature had dropped. But you forgot something, I continued. A napkin only holds its shape when folded. Once opened, it reveals everything it touched. Emily took a step back. Her shoes squeaked on the wet floor. I placed the napkin on the table. Next to it, a new envelope. This time, it was for Toby. Inside, a notarized amendment, shifting 75% of my future estate inheritance to a trust in Toby's name. Not Emily, not Derek. Toby. Because children inherit more than money. They inherit examples. Derek stepped forward, his voice cracking like dry wood. Dad, please. I looked at him, not angry, not even disappointed, just tired. You let her do it. You knew she mocked me, and you did nothing. I didn't know it would go this far. You gave her permission, I said flatly. You made her believe I was weak, and then softer. That was your real betrayal. Emily's lips parted, but no sound came. Joseph raised his hand slightly, signaling an end. I think we're done here, he said, and just like that, they left. Derek didn't look back. Emily yanked the car door open so hard it slammed shut again, rattling the glass. I stood at the window and watched them pull away, their taillights blurred red against the drizzle, and for the first time in weeks, I felt clean. I hadn't meant to visit the trust office that morning, but something told me to make one last stop, like a whisper from that quiet part of a man that gets sharper with age, not duller. The rain had cleared in Amarillo. Morning sun hit the windows of the Jefferson Building, where my accountant's office sat on the third floor. You could still smell damp earth in the wind, West Texas, after a September shower. As I pushed through the glass door, the receptionist, Marcia, a gentle woman with white curls and a voice like soft gravel, offered me coffee without asking. I nodded. She slid the mug across the counter. You here for the final confirmation? Yes, I said. Time to make it official. Joseph joined, me inside the conference room minutes later. He looked different than he had at the church meeting, more relaxed, tie loosened, glasses slightly smudged. A man who had just watched justice edge out of theory and into real life. He handed me a folder. These are the filed copies, he said. The alternate trustee clause was confirmed, the asset lock is finalized, and the protective transfer to Toby's trust is now sealed under state law. Any response from them? I asked. He gave me a look. Her lawyer sent an email. A weak one. Claimed emotional distress. Potential undue influence. We countered with audit evidence and her email headers. And Derek? Silent. I nodded. Joseph hesitated. You sure you don't want to pursue fraud charges? You've got them nailed. I leaned back in the leather chair. No, I said. What I've done already, that's enough. Joseph studied me for a moment, then gave a slow, respectful nod. Legacy strike, he murmured. Clean, quiet, permanent. Later that afternoon, I walked past the garage and opened the side door to my storage shed. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of pine and old paper. I pulled out a banker's box labeled Family Files. It had everything: birth certificates, old insurance records, faded report cards. Near the bottom, folded in a manila envelope, was something I hadn't looked at in years: a handwritten letter from Derek, dated 1999, his freshman year at UT Austin. Dad, thanks for everything. I know you said I could have gotten through school on loans, but you saved me from that. I don't know what I did to deserve that kind of faith in me. I won't let you down. Love, Derek. I stared at the ink for a long time, the loops of a young man who used to believe in something, or maybe just believed in me. I didn't tear it up. I placed it back gently, exactly where it had been, because some things are better left untouched, not forgiven, not weaponized, just remembered. 2 weeks passed, no calls, no visits, until the mailbox rustled at noon on a Tuesday. Inside, a padded envelope. No return address. I opened it slowly, cautious. It wasn't legal papers, it was a frame. Inside the glass, a photograph. Me, Derek, and baby Toby from 5 years ago. I remembered the moment, the three of us at Palo Duro Canyon. Derek had just balanced Toby on my shoulders, and the boy had grabbed my ears with both hands, squealing with joy. A sticky note was attached. For what it's worth, I missed that version of us. D. No apology, but nothing either. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The real showdown came at the bank. I walked in calmly, holding the newly notarized documents, ready to complete the trust restructure. The teller smiled, pointed me to the private wealth office. The manager, a polite, nervous man named Joel, met me with a handshake and a clipboard. I just want to confirm, he said, you're transferring all asset oversight to the child's trust? That's right. Joel adjusted his glasses. And you're permanently revoking joint access for Derek Vaughn and Emily Vaughn? Yes, I said, effective immediately. He hesitated. You sure you want to do that, Mr. Vaughn? It could change family dynamics. I looked him square in the eyes. Family changed a long time ago. I'm just catching up. He stamped the documents. The bank systems updated. Emily's access codes were purged. Derek's joint beneficiary status was replaced by inactive. And me? I walked out lighter than I'd felt in years. The final act wasn't mine. It came by accident. A week later, a colleague from my old firm, Rick Swanson, called. Ron, he said, chuckling over the line, you won't believe who showed up at the alumni mixer for Cedar and Vaughn. I knew before he said it. Emily. She was schmoozing the new partners, telling them she helped guide your estate strategy before your retirement. Tried to hand out her consulting card. I said nothing. Rick laughed. It didn't go well. One of the senior analysts used to clerk for your trust lawyer. Said something about audited misuse and court whispers. She turned pale and left before the shrimp platter got touched. Did they confront her? I asked. Nope. Just let her squirm. Sometimes the silence is the loudest punishment. I ended that day the way I began most now, on the back porch, glass of iced tea in hand, watching the sun fall behind the cottonwoods near the fence. There was no grand ending, no applause, no grandchild running across the lawn shouting my name. Just peace. Just the sound of a distant train horn and the breeze lifting the corner of the newspaper on the table. And on the front page, a headline about fraud cases. Rising in private estate management. I smiled. Sometimes the universe finishes your sentences for you. Before the Jefferson visit, I woke before sunrise, brewed coffee I didn't need, and stood at the kitchen window watching rain bead and slide like mercury. In the glass, I saw the outline of my father and realized it was only me, older than I ever pictured. On Cedar Ridge, a bus sighed to a stop. Backpacks bobbed. A boy waved at no one, or at me. The world kept its appointments. That felt important. In the lobby, a janitor pushed a yellow bucket slowly over marble. Marcia asked after my knees, offered sugar I'd never take. Habit is a gentler kind of love. The conference room AC was fierce. The folder Joseph set between us fanned out like a deck, only I was allowed to deal. Legacy strike, he said, testing the phrase. I imagined a stamp, not a sword, the imprint of my name on the place where I had let it fade. At the shed, I let the door hang half open and watched dust turn in the sunlight like tiny planets. The workbench still held the birdhouse Toby and I had sanded last spring. 2 walls painted blue, the roof still a promise. The banker's box sighed when I lifted the lid. Birth certificates, insurance forms. The manila envelope rasped when I slid it free. Derek's letter hauled me backward in a single glance. The dorm poster curling at the corner, his voice on payphones. Long pauses before asking for help he didn't want to need. I read I won't let you down and felt a belt tighten around my ribs. The padded envelope on Tuesday almost hid between flyers. The bubble wrap crackled. The frame inside was drugstore cheap. The photo wasn't. Palo Duro Canyon, cliffs red as rust. Toby on my shoulders gripping my ears. Derek laughing behind the camera like he believed we were invincible. The note. For what it's worth, I miss that version of us. D. Not an apology. But not nothing. I set it between an old baseball and my wife's porcelain cardinal and let silence answer for me. At the bank, carpet and printer heat gave off the smell of anxious paper. A bowl of mints twisted tight as secrets. Joel's tie was the color of rainwater. His handshake tried to anchor me. The glass walls gave the illusion of honesty. We went clause by clause. I let his question, "Are you sure?" hang until even the air wanted an answer. Family changed a long time ago. I'm just catching up. The stamp thudded. Fields grayed out next to names I once thought braided to mine forever. Brutal. Necessary. Like lancing a wound so it can heal. Rick called while I rinsed cups. He painted the mixer in quick strokes. New blazers, cold shrimp, name tags that wouldn't stick. Emily floating table to table, telling our story like she'd authored it. Then the analyst with a clerkship in his pocket dropped 2 quiet words, audited misuse, like coins in a fountain. She blanched. No confrontation, just temperature. She wasn't comfortable there anymore. Punishment isn't always an event. It's a climate you can't stand to breathe. That evening, the sky did what it always does. Turned the flat behind my fence into a small opera. I carried iced tea to the porch. The chair creaked in harmony with my right knee. The newspaper lifted a corner in the breeze. Private estate fraud. Up 19%. I didn't have to read the rest. I had already lived the graph. I thought of my wife humming over tomatoes, of Derek with popsicle red cheeks, of Emily at her first Thanksgiving asking for my grandmother's cornbread recipe, and how I mistook curiosity for kinship. I thought of Toby's questions about whether birds prefer porches. Maybe people do too. Maybe I finally did. No grand ending arrived. No apology parking at the curb. Closure wasn't a speech. It was a temperature change. A moth struck the bulb and reconsidered its life. Somewhere a child laughed like nothing bad had ever happened. For a fragile moment, I believed him. I penciled a tiny porch onto the birdhouse plan and decided to build it in the morning. Before I left the bank, Joel slid a simple folder across the table. Inside were copies of everything with fresh timestamps, the digital equivalent of a notarized heartbeat. If anything escalates, he said gently, call me before you call them. I told him I planned to call no one. He nodded like he wished more people meant that. On the porch, the freight train laid a low brass note across the fields, and the cottonwoods answered with their own dry applause. The iced tea glass sweated a perfect ring. I pressed the paper into it to make a circle darker than the headline. Somewhere 2 streets over, wind chimes stitched a thin silver thread through the air. Peace wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. It filed things in the right folders and shut the drawer softly. That was enough. The church was quiet that Sunday. Not silent, just the kind of hush you get when the organ hasn't been played in a while and the wooden pews remember the weight of people who no longer sit there. I came early, sat alone in the back. There was no sermon, no choir, Just Toby's third grade class putting on their fall recital. A little medley of American folk songs and a few Bible verses about kindness and truth. Emily and Derek were supposed to be there. They weren't. I wasn't surprised. But Toby spotted me. From across the stage, his eyes widened. He nudged the girl beside him and pointed. I saw the flicker of a smile, the kind only kids can give, free of tension, free of damage. And in that moment, I knew. Everything I'd done, every step of the revenge, the planning, the restraint, it wasn't for me. It was for him. After the performance, the kids were herded into the church hall for cookies and lemonade. I stayed near the doors, not wanting to intrude. Toby ran up, hair a mess, face red from the heat of the lights. "Grandpa, you came!" I nodded. "Of course I did." He dug in his pocket, pulled out a crumpled card made from construction paper. Inside, a drawing of him and me. Stick figures, one tall with gray hair, one short with a red cap. To Grandpa Ron. "Thank you for always coming back. Love, Toby." It broke something in me, but not in a bad way, in the way dry ground finally breaks for the rain. I knelt down. "You did great, bud." He hugged me tight, the way kids do when they don't understand betrayal yet. And then a voice behind me cleared its throat. Derek. His hands were in his pockets, shirt slightly wrinkled, dark bags under his eyes. Emily wasn't with him. "Hey, Dad," he said. I stood slowly, met his eyes. "Didn't expect to see you," I said. He nodded, looked away. "I messed up." I let the silence stretch. He shifted. "I didn't know about the bakery money, I swear. She handled that stuff. I thought she just wanted to honor you with a playful speech." "That wasn't a speech," I said. "That was a mockery." He winced. "Look," he continued, "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to see Toby and maybe say I'm sorry." I looked him over, not the boy who wrote me letters, not yet the man who'd earned them back, but maybe the bridge was starting. "I didn't do what I did to hurt you, Derek," I said. "I did it to protect what matters." He nodded slowly. "I get that now." I placed a hand on his shoulder, just for a second, then walked away. Because forgiveness isn't a finish line. It's a gate you leave open and hope the other person walks through. The next day, I pulled out the napkin. The original one, the one Emily gave me. I held it up against the kitchen light, its folds still sharp, no stains, no tears. And then quietly, I unfolded it, pressed it flat against the table, took a pen, and began to write. Lessons I'll leave behind. Mockery reveals more about the mocker than the mocked. Always keep the envelope. Never trade dignity for peace. Legacy isn't about who inherits your money. It's about who carries your values. I folded the napkin again, slid it into a new envelope, marked it to Toby on the day you turn 18. Then I placed it in the lockbox next to the amended trust documents. Let the world write checks and drafts. I'd leave something more permanent. 1 year later, I stood at the dedication of the new reading wing at Lincoln Elementary. They named it after me. Not because I asked, but because Toby's essay about the person who never gave up on me won a state contest, and the board thought it was only right. I didn't make a speech. I just stood quietly beside the sign, Ronald Vaughn Reading Room for the ones who still listen. Emily never came back. She filed for divorce months after the gala, moved out of Texas. Derek kept in touch, slowly, carefully. Coffee every few months. Holiday cards signed with a hesitant "Love, D." But Toby, he came over every other weekend, helped in the yard, learned how to prune roses, sat beside me during Cowboys games and asked questions about things no 8-year-old should care about, like property law and estate taxes. I gave him answers anyway, not because he needed them, but because he deserved them. You see, revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like a boy in a red cap, sitting beside an old man on a porch swing, asking what legacy means. And the old man answers, "It's the story they tell when you're gone." And in that story, mine at least, There's no napkin left to laugh at. Only the envelope, still sealed, still powerful, still mine. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.